The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of eons. I now see it, hear it, receive and uphold it, about to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us continue with our class on the Mahayana Surangama Sutra. Currently, we're on the volume 2 of the Mahayana Surangama Sutra. Previously, we've already covered the part on the 10 ways of finding the mind and 10 types of seeing nature, or 10 ways of describing the seeing nature. Currently, we're on the part talking about the individual karma and the collective karma. At this time, we are specifically talking about the two false views, especially the part where it discusses that the seeing is not seeing. When we're studying the Surangama Sutra, we should be aware that this particular sutra is the sutra that the great numbers of previous masters relied upon and attained realization. Therefore, in our classes, I've also shared many wonderful stories of their realization, their attainment at times of reading Surangama Sutra. So when we're listening to this sutra, I really hope that you can be very attentive. If you don't have faith to this sutra or don't have faith to the teacher, then you don't have to listen to it. In the sutra, it also states that when even the Buddha was giving the teaching, if the disciple do not generate faith to the teacher, then they can also leave the class. I am giving you the class without having any entrance fee. So you attending this class is completely voluntary. If you're listening to this class but not listening to this class attentively, rather you're doing many other things, other chores while listening to the class, for example, cooking and eating and chatting with the others and then listening to the Dharma, that is disrespect to the Dharma. If you're listening to the radio and doing your life chores, this kind of attitude is disrespectful. It is considered as the misdeeds of abandoning the Dharma. Also, when you're listening to the teaching, I hope you can at least do the chanting before the class and then do the dedication after class. If you can fulfill all of those and chant the aspiration of Samadabhadra altogether, I think it is of a great merit. If we can finish the teaching even for one class with such a wholesome aspiration and dedication of merit, that would be really perfect. We're also trying our best. We have lots of our volunteers, the staff members, they worked very hard to create such a condition for people to listen to this class. It is really not easy. In the past, whenever we attend or whenever we have classes for the sutra or shastra teachings for hundreds of classes, we took it for granted. But nowadays, when we look at the world is going through great changes. There's the war going on outside, and then there's the pandemic going on, and everyone has lots of things. So even if it's just one class, to completely listen and give in one class, I feel a sense of achievement. So I really hope each of you, either you just completely don't listen to it. If you don't take this class with respect and with attentiveness, then even if you don't listen to it, it's fine. But if you want to listen to it, it would be the best if you can make preparation. The reason for me to emphasize on that is because if you were to take it as the most important thing in your day, then your gain would also be different. You will receive a very different sense of achievement after the class. I know that everyone's extremely busy and you have lots of your afflictions and different kinds of pain and so on and so forth. To have this spare time to listen to the Dharma and to seek the Dharma is indeed really difficult. Having this opportunity to receive such a supreme teaching like this is also extremely difficult, especially considering this is the Dark Age. Now that we have received the teaching of Surangama Sutra, I think every one of us need to make the aspiration, whomsoever you are, monastic or lay practitioner, we should make the aspiration to propagate the teaching for lifetimes. Because the great masters from the past, they all vowed to promote the teaching of Surangama Sutra, especially around the time of the perish of the Dharma. Before the extinguish of the Buddha Dharma, it is the crucial time to propagate the Surangama teaching, because as long as the Surangama Sutra is still in this world, the Buddha Dharma will not perish. Even if we only listen to the teaching for the first 2 chapters, then we should still make this aspiration. I will propagate the teaching of at least the first 2 chapters. I believe this kind of aspiration that's made by the great masters, they all had their valid reasons to make this aspiration. In the past, we had studied Vimalakirti Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, the Diamond Sutra. Those are such great sutras, and now we have all attained the true or transmission. And in the future, whenever you have the opportunity, I really hope all of you, the Dharma teachers, you should give the teachings on it. And you should expound the teaching in various Dharma centers. Nowadays, I think people come to Tibet only to ask for some kind of predictions and rituals, which is really strange. In the past, whenever people come to the Tibetan plateau, they usually would seek for the Dharma. Whenever they feel that, whenever they receive a certain Dharma teaching, they would feel a sense of achievement, and whenever they don't, they would feel quite defeated. So whenever we need to, since we are already here, then we need to also have this kind of mindset. We are here to seek for the Dharma. In this way, whenever it's your time to get outside and start to propagate the teaching and benefit sentient beings, I think you will also have the great opportunities to spread the Dharma teachings. Of course, you have to prepare yourself well before giving the teachings to the others, so you need to be attentive when you're listening to the teachings. Before my preparation to this class, I also cross-referenced to various kinds of commentaries, but I think my biggest advantage of giving the teachings is that I understand both Chinese and Tibetan, so I can cross-reference with various commentaries of the great masters. Though I may have made some mistakes throughout, but if I have parts that I don't understand, and I would also present it to you. But the majority of the parts, I think they're quite appropriate to give the teachings to all of you. In general, this opportunity is extremely difficult to gain, and you should cherish this. Though while listening to it, there could be some difficulties or could be some obstacles, but let's go through it with persistence. Now let us continue with the Surangama Sutra. Previously, we've already got into the part where the Buddha expounded on the collective karma and the individual karma. To continue, the Buddha said that Ananda will now go back and forth comparing these two matters for you to make both of them clear. In terms of back and forth, the great masters of the past, they have different ways of explaining what is back and what is forth. But if we were to listen to some of the commentaries, I think it could become a blockage to the understanding of the sutra. When I was reading into the commentary of Master Meng Can, he said that there are great masters of the past who expounded the teaching based on their own level of realization. Therefore, the explanation is different as well. Therefore, if we completely follow this and follow that to make the explanation, it's not extremely necessary. So, as the later practitioners, what we need to do is to, first of all, study carefully into the sutra and into the commentary, and then we can rely upon our own wisdom to expound the meaning of the sutra. But of course, without such wisdom and realization, it would be difficult. Chandrakirti once said that Nagarjuna, whom expounded on the profound emptiness of the sutras in the root wisdom, the fundamental wisdom of Madhyamika. And later, Chandrakirti further explained that based on the Madhyamika Shastra according to Nagarjuna. So I think Chandrakirti purposely manifested in such a way that he was not able to delve into the profundity of the sutras. But it is only a way to show that for the later practitioners, we need to rely on the great master's commentary to understand the sutras. Otherwise, it could be difficult. Of course, if you can understand the sutras by yourself and have that level of realization, that would be really great. But the meaning over here is that the particular teachings by different masters are different based on their different realization. Over here, the forward, going forth points to the Dharma, and going back means to use examples. That is the explanation. I think it's fitting. In terms of the example that's given, that is the circle around the lamp, and then the meaning is on the collective karma and the individual karma. Whenever we look at the sentient beings, in fact, they all have cataracts that perceives the ring around the lamp, and that is because of their collective karma and the individual karma. So the Buddha then used the example of the lamp, the ring around the lamp, with the collective karma and the individual karma back and forth. So the Buddha, starting from here, is going to expound how the object of seeing is different. Previously, we've already talked about the seeing is not seeing. And then the Buddha continued to compassionately expound on the collective karma and individual karma with the combination of teaching and the example. The Buddha continued to tell Ananda. Sometimes I say Ananda, sometimes I say Ananda. He said, Ananda, in the case of living beings, a false view of individual karma by which he sees the appearance of a circular reflection around the lamp. The appearance seems to be real, but in the end, which is seen comes into being because of the cataracts of the eyes. So the Buddha told Ananda by saying that, well, the sentient beings because they have individual karma, and because of the individual karma, they have their delusions. So firstly, the Buddha addressed the individual karma and the delusion. In the sutra, it says that the beings with the cataracts on the eyes, they would see the circular reflection around the lamp. Though that the circular reflection looks real, looks like the object of perception. However, that circular reflection only comes to being because of the cataracts on the eyes. It is because of the illness of the eyes that is how they can perceive that circular reflection around the lamp. So to the sentient beings with that specific individual karma, they perceive the colorful circular reflection of the lamp. But for beings without the eye cataracts, they don't see it. Therefore, the objects of perception is caused by the cataracts of the eyes. The cataracts are the result of awareness of seeing rather than a product of form.
见的这种毛病，就是所它的这个言语，也就是说是这个言语的这种镜像，就圆圈的话呢，实际上是它的那个见解呢就有纹束的，就是好像那个
the circular reflection appears because of the cataracts. According to Master Changshui's commentary, it says that the delusion once arises, it appears to be existent, however, it is not really existent. Therefore, over here it says that the seeing, rather than the products of the form, it is simply a result of awareness. It's simply just because of the cataracts. However, the Buddha continued to say, the essence of seeing which perceives the cataracts is free from all disease and defects. However, the person's inner seeing nature is not wrong. Though he perceives this circular halo around the lamp because of his cataracts, but the seeing nature is not defect. The seeing of the circular reflection is just an incident that happened because of causes conditions. But the nature of a seeing does not have any increase nor decrease. It doesn't have any delusion or defects.
因为他没有见到颠倒的原因呢，他的见性有增长，就是没有这样。
It is not that when he sees the delusion, his seeing nature decrease, or he doesn't see the delusion, therefore his seeing nature increase. There's no such decrease or increase associated to the seeing nature. And then the Buddha continued to say that, for example, you now use your eyes to look at mountains, the rivers, the countries, and all the living beings. The Buddha said that, well, now you look at the world with your own eyes. Everything that you can see, the scenery, the mountains, rivers, the countries, and the sentient beings of the 10 categories or of the 6 realms, all of the myriads of appearances, in fact, is simply because of the illness of seeing of the sentient beings. They are not truly existent. Just as we had already studied that people with cataracts, they would see the circular reflection as solidly existent. Similarly, we people also see the mountains, rivers, and countries and sentient beings as truly existent. In fact, this is simply because of the beginningless delusion that is derived from ignorance. These are all caused by our eye cataracts, that is, the ignorance. In fact, all of these appearances are simply delusions without truly existence, without any true existence. Some masters in their commentary quoted from the Avatamsaka Sutra, it says that because of the sentient being's delusion, we see there's the Buddha and then there's the world. If one were to understand the truth, then they would see that there is no Buddha and no world. So for the sentient beings, because of our delusion, then we see that there's the Buddha who resides in the pure lands, and the impure sentient beings lives in the impure world. But if one can see through all of those veils of delusions and see the truth, then they would be able to understand, in fact, there is no Buddha and no world. Of course, that is not to say that everything is void. It is not that at all. We can say that all the things that has a form, has characteristic, or has elaboration, they are not attainable in the absolute truth. The Buddha then further explains on it by saying that seeing and the condition of seeing seems to manifest what is before you. Originally, my enlightenment is bright. So the seeing means the object of seeing, and then the condition of seeing shows the object of seeing, which means the mountains and rivers and so on. Whenever we make a quick observation, it appears that the seeing and the object of seeing are separated. Though it seems that the object and subjects are separated, and the object and subjects are all existent, just as whenever we look at the computer, it seems to be right over there.
Though
that all kinds of manifestations make us feel that the object and the mind are separate. However, over here the Buddha said that originally my enlightenment is bright, which means that our primordial awareness is luminous. Other than that, there is nothing else. Everything simply appears as separate. And then the Buddha continued to say that the seeing and condition arise from cataracts. Realize that the seeing arises from cataracts. So there are different explanations on the seeing and conditions. The seeing means the subject of seeing, and then the conditions means the object of being seen. In fact, all the appearances that manifest on the outside that are the object of seeing are the delusions that, for example, perceived by the eye cataracts. According to the Zen masters, they would call it as the aspect of characters and aspect of seeing. Aspect of characters meaning the object. According to the clear realization, it says that any forms, any characters, any characteristics, any of the objects on the outside, those are the aspects of characters. And then the seeing that has the ability to see, which is the subject, also meaning the cataracts, which is delusional as well. So these two aspects, the object and subjects, are both the things that could obscure us. They are not true. And then the Buddha continued to say that the enlightened condition of the basically enlightened bright mind has no cataracts. So the enlightened mind, the true mind, doesn't have any delusions. It is of a pure mind. The Buddha continued to say that that which is aware of the faulty awareness is not disease. It is the true perception of seeing. How can you continue to speak of feeling, hearing, knowing, and seeing? Now, the true perception of seeing is that which is aware of the faulty awareness. The true awareness is not delusional, and that true awareness is the true seeing. So this true seeing is nothing that has character. When it comes to the true seeing, the true perception, then how can you continue to speak of feeling, hearing, knowing, and seeing? As long as you hold on to those feeling, hearing, knowing, and seeing, you're still holding on to a character. Then it is still not the true seeing. In both the Bodhisattva Charivatara and the Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment, they state that if one were to use the pure awareness, not perceiving the delusion and all kinds of pure characteristics, meaning if the pure awareness, if it is the pure awareness, it does not grasp onto delusion or the pure characters. So for people who have the pure awareness or the true perception, they would not even grasp onto the pure characters of the Buddha. They would not hold onto that. Sometimes whenever we feel that, oh, I have attained enlightenment, I've already seen it, I've already seen the truth, I already got some miraculous powers. In fact, that is still part of the grasping, which has been scolded by great masters of the Zen traditions. Whatever has characteristics, whatever that you would still have a grasp onto, you should give up on that. As long as you still have grasp onto characters, you should not grasp onto it, you should not hold on to it. So whenever you feel that I have already attained realization and so on and so, in fact, this is still incorrect, because at the time of seeing the true luminous mind, you would not have such a great grasping. The true enlightened one would not find anything to be obtained from the seeing and the seer. This is very much explained in the Surangama Sutra. That is why there is such analysis through it, because at that time, though that in the appearance of conventional point of view, you know that you have this kind of realization. You see it, you know it very well, very clearly. But if you were to hold on to that kind of state, then that is simply delusion. Some of the masters or some of the mundane beings, they constantly talk about their realization. They would use their own dualistic mind and dualistic grasping onto the so-called realization, onto their work, onto their service of the Sangha, and they would even pretend that they have already attained realization and give the others predictions. When it comes to things like such, especially giving predictions to the others, and when it comes to anything that would dab into the field of accumulation of karma, I think it would be the best for you not to do that, because you are still using your dualistic mind to do so. The great masters of the past, they don't usually talk about this. They don't talk about, oh, I dreamt of so-and-so deity in the dream. There's so-and-so auspicious things, and in front of the others, they wouldn't say that you are suffering from this is only because of your past karma. You've killed so-and-so sentient beings. That's how you are suffering from this. And just wait for a few days. Your family would change in such a way, or your situation would have various changes. So they don't really do that for those great masters with genuine wisdom, they don't do that. Majority of people who give you those kinds of predictions are out of sometimes just guessing, which is really inappropriate. And even if they become true afterwards, it could be because of coincidence. It is not because they've seen it by their perception, direct perception, that is. For the monastics, if they were to say such kind of things, especially if they've already taken any of the monastic vows, it is a breaching of the root vow. For such kind of people, they don't even have the opportunity to stay at the same place with the great Sangha. One should understand that. It is said that all the object and the subject, the seeing and the one to be seen, they are still deluded, they are still diseased. If one were to hold on to the feeling, hearing, knowing, and seeing as truly existent, that is also inappropriate. Therefore, you now see me and yourself and the world and all kinds of living beings because of a disease in the seeing. What is aware of disease is not diseased. This is really important to remember. So at that time, the Buddha told Ananda, saying that, well, now you see me, you see my perfect body, also you see your own body, and the forms of the 10 types of beings in this world. I believe one commentary has the explanation of the 10 types of beings. Also, we talked about it in the Diamond Sutra. There are the 4 modes of birth: womb, egg, spontaneous generation from warmth and moisture, and the miraculous birth or manifestation. Also, there's a form, formless, thought, thoughtless, neither thoughtless nor not thoughtless, and then the top of the celestial. So those are the 9, and according to other commentaries, they have basically the same of the 4 modes of birth, also the form and formless, also the beings with thoughts, without thoughts, not with thoughts, not without thoughts, so altogether there are 10 types. I believe we study this in the Diamond Sutra, especially the thought and thoughtless ones, so I'm not going to expound too much over here. The Buddha then said that either you see me or see yourself or the 10 types of beings, they're simply your delusion from your seeing. They're all the diseased seeing. And such kind of diseased seeing is not the true seeing. In the conventional truth, according to Madhyamika, in fact, though we say that they're conventional truth, but they're still false. That is from the Madhyamika's point of view. Therefore, let it be the form of the Buddha or the beings of the 10 types. We should see them with a conventional. We should see them from a conventional point of view, but the conventional point of view still is based on the dualistic perception. Therefore, it is delusional as well. It is an inappropriate way of understanding the true seeing. The true essential seeing by nature has no disease. Therefore, it is not that we normally can call seeing. The Buddha then said that the true seeing is not diseased. It is not the one with cataracts can perceive. As long as you see with characteristics, they are still not obtainable. Therefore, it is not seeing. The not seeing is the true seeing, which does not fall into any of the extremes. It doesn't have seeing, doesn't have not seeing. It doesn't have neither seeing or not seeing, or neither of the seeing and not seeing. That is the true seeing. According to the Beacon of Certainty, it talks about such kind of seeing without a partiality. That is the true seeing.
这个别野通分，就别野的这个同公野的，就是有两种嘛，就是这个别野的这
Previously,
个
we
道
already
理呢
talked
跟
about
意义这个
how
界
the
分，就是这
how
样
there's
想
the
的。
individual karma and there's
然后接
collective
下来
karma,
呢
the two
就
types.
是这样那个
Now
公野
we've
就公
already
野就是所见的。其
studied
实
the
这个
part
公野和
where the
别野
individual
所见的
karma
话呢，也有
associated
就
to
是一
the
些大的就
example.
是这个依靠这个而这个
Now
开
let's
悟的
look at
就
collective
看到
karma.
那个应
Many
该有一
great
个叫做
masters
瑞
rely
边
on
禅
this
师
part
就瑞边
of
禅
the
师，就是
teaching and
他是
attain realization.
他
I
的这
read
个
the
事迹
story
的
of
话呢，就是在那个明朝的
Zen
时候
Master
呢，就是
Ribai.
嘉兴大藏经
He
当中有
was
一
living
这
during
个
the Ming
白
Dynasty.
日
His
代禅师
story
的
was
他的这个
recorded
就是
in
语
the
录当中呢，
Jiaxing
就是也
Tripitaka,
有就说是这
also
个禅师的
recorded
话呢，就
in
是以前
his
那个小的时候呢，就是
collections of
也就是
teachings.
特别
It
就
was
是这
said
个
that
禅师呢，
this
就是
Zen
他
master,
是
when he
就
was
是
young,
特别的这种这个苦
he
心
had
嘛，就
lots
是
of
这个禅师
special
他自己的语
qualities,
录当
and
中说
this
是
particular Zen
有些
master
人说是一切都是
practiced
看破放下，但是这个作
great
为
amount of
大
aesthetic
就是作为
practices.
根基好
In
的人来
his
讲，应
teachings,
该
he
是
said
可以
that
的就是像以前这个拜占禅师
people
的
who
话呢，就是
can
有一些禅宗的
let
这个
go
话
of
题，就是
everything,
说
that would
一
be
通就是这
excellent
个字呢，
for
就是已经开悟了，就是一
people
切
with
放下
great
可以。 但一般的
capacity,
这种这个
such as
修
Master
行人的
Baijiang,
话，那就是
who
就必须要
basically
供奉，
relied
如果
on
没有
some
供
of
奉的
the
话呢，也不可能就是
koans
得到这
of
种这个境
Zen
界。
Buddhism,
他
and
自己
then
的
he
话呢，
attained
以前就是从
liberation.
小的时候呢，就是
But for
也遇到过一些这个
the intermediate
这个
and
就是应该是一
very
些善知识吧，就是在他
common
面前呢，就是做过
capacitated
一些
practitioners
就是两句
without
就不知道什么两句，可能
diligent
念佛方面
practice,
念佛
then
方面的。
the
然后他呢，就是一直
realization
这
would
个
not be
念
attained.
诵，就是最后的时
It
候
is said
最
that
最后的
Master
是已
Ribai
经就是不
chanted
一样，
sutras, not
就
sure
念得
which
特
one
别
he
的
chanted.
精进。
He
后来的
blistered
话
his
呢，就是
mouth,
有一个禅师
so
呢，
he
就
was
是
very
也是
diligent.
得这个
Later,
这
he
个
attained
楞严经啊，就
realization.
是听到楞严经。
And
然后楞严经呢，
another
就是
Zen
讲
master
到这
also
个
listened to
别
the
野和共
teaching
野，就
of
是这个地方的话呢，就是
Surangama
他突然
when
有
it
所
comes
这
to
个
the
开
explanation
悟。
of
但是这种开
individual
悟呢，就
karma
是
and
它
the
是仅
collective
限于
karma,
是
he
一种
attained
这个
realization.
单供方
But
面
that
的，就是
realization
还
was
不是
still
就是
at
最高的这种境
the
界。后来呢，就是他
realization of
已经有四方
emptiness
的
and
时候
leaning
呢，
towards
有一
the
个叫做
voidness
这个
aspect,
明
not the
禅师啊，
highest
就这是
level of
明代的时候
realization.
呢，好像
Later,
也
when
是
he
很这
started
个
to
出
traveling
名的，就
around
是
and
叫这
studying
个
around, he
禅
met
染
a
圆
great master,
什么禅
a
染
great
圆成大
Zen
师，就是
master,
在他面
Master
前呢，
Yu
就是
Min,
就开始这个
who
就
was
是做一
extremely
些法
famous
门。
around
当
Ming
时呢，就是
Dynasty.
他就问这
At
个
that
所谓
time,
的这
he
个四大
started
四
to
假
receive
的
some
这个
teachings
身体
from
也
Master
是
Yu
活
Min.
的，
The
然后黏
teachings
糊者也是不
including the
存在
four
的，
great
就是你也
elements
是无所
are
不存在的。
compounded,
最后
the
呢，就是
body
他
has
有
no
一天就
self,
是依靠就
there
是
is no
他
one
这
that
样的一
is
些
chanting
指
the name
点
of
的
the
话呢，
Buddha
已经
and
这个就开悟，就是
selflessness.
开悟以后呢，就是到处就是这
Eventually,
个去利益
under
众
such
生嘛。
guidance, he
后来的话，
attained
他的境
realization.
见
After
解的话呢，就
realization,
像
after he attained
训老
realization,
和尚的
he
这个
started
脸
to
谱里面
benefit
讲的一
sentient
样的，就
beings
是
by giving them
什么
teaching
这
of
个虚
Dharma,
空这
and
个
his
粉
realization
碎啊，就是大
attained
地
to
平
the
衡啊，
level
就是等
that
等，就是这样的这个
was
境界。但是
described
他因为这个呢，
just
就是
like how
没有放弃，就是
Master
到晚年的
Xu
时候呢，就是
composed,
他还要这个下山，就是下山
which
的
is
时候呢，
the
他
space
身
has
上就是
shattered
只有一
and
个
the
呐
ground
喊，
has
还有一
sank.
个炮，还有一个杖，就是
But he
还有
continued
一
to
个裤褂
practice
吧，
in
就是
such
除
a
此
way
之
to
外
maintain his
什么都没有，
realization,
就
and
是
in
然后
the
呢，就是
later
去
time
这
of his
个利
life,
益众生。然
he
后在这样的这种
went
应该是一种
away
这种
from
不信
the
身嘛，就是以这
mountain
样的这个
retreat.
身份呢，
At that time,
7 年
he
当
only
中的话
carried
呢，就是
one
他就
monastic
没有
robe,
这个脱
one
衣服
bowl,
啊。
and one
然后
mace,
这
as
个
well as
13
one
年当中，
meditation
好
cushion.
像
Other
记
than
得
that,
是
he
13年
didn't
当
carry
中的话呢，
anything else.
没有这
He
个
started
睡
benefiting
觉，就是
sentient
一直呢
beings
就是
like
还在
such
这里，就
while
一直这
traveling
样修
around
行
in such
到
an
最后
ascetic,
呢，
ascetic
实现圆寂了。所以我想我们
method.
这个很多人啊，就自己稍微有一
He
点
did
开悟
not
的
take
时候
off his
呢，就
clothing
觉
and
得
did
这个
not
现
sleep
在
for
就开
13
始积
years,
累资粮也
kept
不
on
需要，几乎
practicing.
罪证
until passed into parinirvana. When we listen to these kind of stories, I think many of you who maybe had attained a little bit of realization and started to give up on accumulate merit and stopped confessing the past negative deeds and stopped practicing, stopped listening to the dharmas. So you can look at those differences. Master Ribai, such kind of teaching really shows us that there are people who started listening to the teachings at a very young age, and then when he listened to the Dharma teaching, in front of other teachers and attained a certain level of realization based on the teaching on the individual karma and the collective karma. He attained realization, though that realization is on emptiness only. So the kind of emptiness that's leaning towards a voidness. At that time, he thought that there is no karma, no causes and effects. None of those are existent. And under such kind of realization and understanding, he had a great illness. Only after he was recovered from that illness, he started to attain liberation and realization through the Pitha instructions. Therefore, whenever we look at the causes, whenever we look at the collective karma, individual karma, we should definitely contemplate upon the value of this teaching, especially if you have a little bit of understanding, a little bit of realization. We should not give up on the accumulation of merit. We should definitely not give up on that. The previous great masters, the higher their realization, the more careful they are with causes and fruition, with what to accept and what to reject. And the more they are diligent with practicing the virtuous activities. So some of you may think that you already attained realization, but if you look at your activity, if you're getting more indolent and if you're more distracted and if your activities are even more inappropriate than before, then your so-called enlightenment or your so-called realization is just Mara activity. It is not real enlightenment. And then the Buddha said that the individual person with the diseased eyes is the same as the people of that one country. He sees a circular reflection erroneously brought about by a disease of the seeing. Previously, we talked about how there are people who have eye disease, they would see the circular reflection of the lamp. And then in the previous example, we also talked about if there are two countries, one of the country's people only sees meritorious signs and the other one only sees disastrous signs. In the sutra, it says that he sees circular reflection erroneously brought about by a disease of seeing. Those people who sees the circular reflection is because of the disease of seeing. It is because of the eye disease such delusion arise. The beings with a collective share see inauspicious things. Previously, we talked about the two countries. For example, if they were to see two suns, two moons, and the circular signs of the moon, of the sun, and so on. Recent years, I think we've seen lots of inauspicious signs. For example, we see how the rivers and lakes become red and all kinds of inauspicious signs. In fact, those kinds of signs are warnings where one should start to chant more sutras and to practice more virtuous deeds. Let it be on a personal level or on a collective level. Whenever we perceive those kind of inauspicious signs around, we can still change them around. This is according to Liao Fan's 4 lessons on the ways of changing one's destiny. For example, he was predicted by the other people saying that Liao Fan will die at the age of 54. But then later he met a Zen master whose name is Yungu, and Master Yungu told him that he can still change his fate by practicing more virtuous deeds. And that's how he lived all the way till over 80 years of age. Therefore, lots of those inauspicious things, they can still be changed. In terms of the whole world, if in the collective karma, the sentient beings see those inauspicious signs, but if everyone started to practice virtuous deeds in this way, because of the unfathomable causes and conditions can change, then the result can also be changed, because the good causes and conditions can change to be bad, and the bad can be good. Therefore, whenever we see inauspicious signs, inauspicious causes and conditions, then we shouldn't give up right away. We should rather start to accumulate auspicious causes and conditions and transform such inauspicious signs. This is quite important. Over here, the Buddha said that the circular sign, the circular reflection of the lamp, and the inauspicious signs that's perceived by the sentient beings of this country, in fact, they are simply the things, the delusions people could perceive through their karma. So the beings with a collective share see auspicious things in the midst of their midst of karma of identical view arise pestilence and evils. It is because of those kinds of evils that brought about the inauspiciousness of the sentient beings. Whenever one sees those circular reflections or those inauspicious signs, they're based on the negative karma. Some of the negative karmas could be big and some of them could be small. There are different levels of it, and different stages of it. At first, there is the ignorance and then self-grasping, and then there is the affliction and then create karma. But those are simply the beginningless delusion, which corresponds to the ignorance of the sentient beings. Those are caused by such beginningless delusions. Therefore, all of the suffering and delusions that's caused by the collective karma of sentient beings or the individual karmas, the root of all of them, they're simply the evil and negative dualistic thoughts. The collective karma of sentient beings. To give you an example, when we look at Ukraine, indeed the sentient beings are suffering. But out of that group of people, the Ukrainians, the sentient beings are experiencing different things, because within the collective karma there is still individual karma, and then within the individual karma there are still the collective karma. Also, for example, during the demolition period of the valley over here, it was also because of the collective karma. But out of that collective karma, there were people who experienced more suffering and some less. Those are the individual karma within the collective karma. But all of those are caused by the delusion from beginningless time. As the karma that's accumulated by sentient beings has the root of a very long period of time. Therefore, in a short period of time, and some could be just for a very short period of time. Some could be made by your previous life, and some could have been planted in your alaya for a very long period of time in your subconscious. After being there for a long period of time, when there are causes and conditions, slowly the fruition would mature. There's then another example the Buddha gives. It is the same in the 3,000 continents of Jambudvipa, throughout the 4 great seas, and in the Saha world, and throughout the 10 directions. All countries that have outflows and all sentient beings are the enlightened, bright, wonderful mind without outflows. Within the 3,000 continents, the Saha world, and the countries and the sentient beings of 10 directions, they're of the bright mind, they're of the enlightened, bright, wonderful mind without outflows. They had never even lost the bright mind, that enlightened mind. However, because of the false diseased conditions that are seen, heard, felt, and known, they mix and unite in false birth, mix and and unite in false death.
这个呢，相当于是我们这个密法当中的这样，就本来呢就是众生都是清净的，但是
In fact,
因为
the
在那个
sentient
本际
beings,
当中显现极限的
all the
时候呢
sentient beings, all the
不
way
现如来的话
from
呢
the
就是
human
他已
beings
经
to
就是了
the
无自性
little
而丰盛的
insects,
话呢，
they're
他
seeing
虽然自己
their
本有的这样的
hearing,
性
their
质也没有
feelings
了无
are
不
all
一样，
delusions.
然后因为这
This
个
part
地面
is
的话
very
呢，就是
similar
赫
to
赫王生，
the
赫赫王生
Tantrayana
就
teachings
然后
because
呢，就
it
是
states
各种
that
这
all
个因
sentient
缘
beings
具
are
足的时候
pure
呢，就是赫赫
from
这个
the
产生，
basic
然后各种
ground.
因缘这个妄想
When
具足的时候呢，就
there's
是赫
the
赫而自
appearance
然，
of the
就是所以
basic
呢，
ground, when
就
the
众生的
basic
话呢，
ground
就
started
确
to
实是
manifest at
在
that
这样
time,
的这种世界
Samadhi
当
had
中的话呢，
already
就是不
come
断
to
这
the
个生
understanding
散，在
of
六道轮回里
his
面就是
true
不
nature.
断的生散。
However, the sentient beings, though they
有一
also
个
have
那
such
个
enlightened mind,
就
but
是
they do
心
not
绪吧，
understand
高
it.
僧传
For
嘛，
such
就是这
reason,
个
they
高僧
mix and
传当中
unite
呢，
in
就是
false
说是
birth,
有一
mix
个
and
法师
unite in
就是
false
叫
death,
做
and
舍本质
continuously they
啊，
take
就是这
rebirth
个
again
本
and
来
again
智
in
慧的本
samsara,
质。
in the
他呢就
six
是12岁的
realms.
时候都开始出
There's
家，
a
后
Dharma
来呢
master whose
就
name
专
is
门学
Shibenji.
这个
He
华严经，就是学的也
was
是很好的。
ordained at
然
the
后到
age
了
of
这个
12 and
19 岁的
then
时候，
studied
应该是这个
Avatamsaka
经缘
Sutra.
界吧，就是
At
然后
the
呢，就是
age
到
of
各地
19,
就
he
是参加
received
一些这个
precepts and started
就是
to
造一些名山
visit
啊，就是然后
and
去
pay
各
home
种这个
pay
宗
pilgrimage
派
to
就是各
various
种这
mountains
个
and
学
started
派，
to
但是
study
呢，就是他对自己的这
in
个心
various
呢，就是
schools
还
and
没有这个
various
完全的这种了悟啊，就是没有
at
完全的了
various
悟。后来呢，就是
monasteries,
他
but
就
he
参
still
禅
had
呢，
not
就是大
attained
概是
realization
12
of his
年，
mind.
就禅修方
After
面就是相
being
互
in
和善
meditation for
之后
12
的话呢，
years,
就是自己的心呢，就是
he
有所
started
这个认识
to
啊。有所认识的时候呢，
have
他去
developed,
就
he
继续
started to
这个
develop some
去
understanding
弘
of
法的
his
时候
own
呢，
mind.
就是当时的有一
When
个
he started
过
to
往，
give
就是也
teachings
就发现
and
了，就是
propagating
他
the
这个呢，
Dharma,
就是对他很有
he was
很有
discovered
信
by a
心，然后
king
迎亲就是迎亲以后
whom
的
had
话呢，
lots
就
of
是
faith
当
to
时
him
这
and
个禅师
welcomed
就是
him
本质
to
禅
give
师呢，
teachings.
到了那个国家
And
的时候
Master
呢，好
Benji,
像
when he
那个
went
国
to
家
that
呢，就是
country,
到处都是这
he
个，
noticed
就是
that the
这个
country
就
looks
是特
like
别就是幸福美满，就是富饶无比啊，
everything
就是这
is
样的。然后这个呢，就是社会者阐述问题，那
quite
你的这个国家就
prosperous.
这么这个美好，就
Everyone
是什么意思啊？
seems to be very happy.
然后他
And
说
then
是
at that
我是
time,
那
the
个
Zen
这个
master
共同
asked the
三宝
king,
的，就是这是三宝
what's
的
the
这个
causes
家
and
产的这
conditions
个
for
出
the
现。
happiness and
然后他
prosperity
就
of your
说，
country?
如果你是共
The
同
king
三
said
宝的
that
话
it
呢，
is
就是为
because
什么这
I
个私人来
made
的时候不利
offering
呢？就是可能
of
对法师有点，
I
因为
made
毕
the
竟是国
offerings
王，
to the
他对
three
有点不
jewels,
是很公
and it
平。
is because of
后
the
来呢，就
blessings
是
of
这
three
个国
jewels
王
my
就
country
从
is
这
very
个高头
prosperous.
上就是下来，就
And then he
把他
said that,
向这个
well,
僧人就是
if
这个
you
本本
made
着禅
offering
师
to
呢，
the
就是
three
进行
jewels, then
敬礼啊，
why
就是
when the
之后的
monks
话呢，
here
就
you
是好
don't
像应该是
pay
他的这
homage,
个
you
王
don't
后还是什
prostrate?
么的，就是那个
Hearing that, the king
皇后吧，就是
got
皇
off
后
from
她
his
的母
throne
亲，
and
她呢
prostrated to
就是请求
the
就是
Zen
这个
master.
法师
After
呢，就
that,
是降那个楞严经啊，就是降那个楞严经。然后他
the
就降到
mother
了
of
这
the
个不到
king
2卷的时候啊，
requested
就是有
the
一天的话呢，
Zen
就是
master
说
to
是
give teaching
神
on the
死去
Surangama
来
Sutra. When
结诊
he
缩
gave
甲
teachings
就
on the
生死
part
去来
where
生
it
死
is
去
says
来
that
结诊缩甲而已，就是意
the
思就
birth
是
and
说生
death,
死都是生死也好，
the
来去也
coming
好，
and
这些
going,
的
the
话呢，
coming and
全部
going,
都是这个就
they
是
are
就
simply
是目
the
真所
false
见，就是
seeing.
就有
Only.
言
They're
语的人
simply
的
just
所
the
讲，
false
就是
seeing.
生死也好，就去来
Let
也
it
好，
be
这些
birth
的
and
话
death,
呢，就
let it
是
be coming and
借
going.
目
They're
真所
simply
讲，就
the
是也就是说
ones
是这
with
是都是使这个有
eye
言语者的这个
disease
所讲
that
的。其
sees
实
those.
本性当中的话呢，就是
In fact, in the
这个
nature,
生灭世啊，就是这
there's
些都是应
nothing
该没有的意思吧？就是后来呢，就是
that
他
is
就说完了以后呢，就是
death
他说
or
我要去
birth.
这个化藏世界，
It
然后
doesn't have the birth
坐
and
着
death at
法
all.
就是坐着
After he
去
gave
实现
teaching on
圆
this,
界，
he
就是
said,
这样的。
I am
所
heading to
以
the
我们
Avatamsaka
前
world,
面呢
and
就
then
是
he
讲到的这个和合而
passing
生，和
to
合而生
nirvana in the position of sitting right away. Therefore, when we look at this particular sentence, it says that they mix and unite in false birth, mix and unite in false death. It is exactly the same thing. It is because of we mix with such kind of falsity, therefore there is birth and death. But they're simply the result of our ignorant afflictions. That's how the birth and death started to stir in the samsaric wheel.
这个词好像也有一点意思的感觉，但是不知道。肾盲的话呢，就是下面不应该写木啊，肾木。它是这样的，就是所以说， 嗯然后接下来呢，就是若能愿你住。
And then over here it says that if you can leave far behind all conditions which mix and unite all those which do not mix and unite, then you can also extinguish and cast out the causes of birth and death, and obtain perfect bodhi, the nature which is neither produced nor extinguished. If one can part from the mixing and uniting, then you can also extinguish and cast out the causes of birth and death. In terms of mix and unite, according to Master Oyi, he said that the birth and death has different types of has different categories. For example, there's the birth and death that has different stages, just as how the sentient beings of the 6 realms, in one stage they would become an ox and then or yak, and then later they take the rebirth as a hungry ghost. So this is the stages by stages. The kind of birth and death without mixing and uniting is by a very subtle causes and conditions, and this kind of causes and conditions is applicable to the great noble ones, such as great arhats. When they take rebirth, it is simply transmigration, and their mind stream would switch just a very little bit, unlike how, like the sentient beings, when they take birth and death, the 5 aggregates would take stage by stage in the mixing and uniting. Therefore, over here, we are looking at how it is beyond uniting and mixing. The later part, when we look at the ignorant karma, how it unites and mixes, it further explains it. To have the perfect bodhi, it is in fact beyond cause of birth and death, and is neither produced nor extinguished. It is pure, clear, basic mind and everlasting fundamental enlightenment. It is without coming, without going, without birth and without death. Once realizing that state of once one attains that stage of realization, then there is no increasing, there is no decreasing. Let's look at uniting and mixing and not uniting and not mixing. The Buddha then continues to say, Ananda, although you have already realized that the wonderful, bright, basic enlightenment does not by nature come from cause and condition, and is not by nature spontaneous, you have not yet understood the enlightenment source is produced neither from mixing and uniting nor from the lack of mixing and uniting. So the Buddha over here, after giving the explanation to Ananda, he summarized the teaching first. Says, Ananda, you already understood that the basic enlightenment, your wonderful, bright, basic enlightenment, is not caused by causes and conditions. It is not a production. As it is stated previously, it is not of spontaneity. You've already understood those. But now you still have not to understand something. What is it? That is, the enlightened source is produced neither from mixing and uniting nor from a lack of mixing and uniting. Now you're wondering, is it a production from uniting and mixing, or from a lack of mixing and uniting? Is it a production of mixing ignorance and karma, or not mixed with karma and ignorance? is it a production of practice, or is it not a production of practice, or is it a production of not practice? There are different ways of explaining this uniting and mixing and not uniting and mixing. So over here, the Buddha said that now you are still quite confused about this part about mixing and not mixing. Previously, you have already understood the not part of the cause and conditions and not spontaneity. You've already understood that. But now let's look at uniting and mixing and not uniting, not mixing. And then the Buddha asked Ananda again, Ananda, now I will once again make use of a mundane object before you to question you. You now hold that false thoughts mix and unite with the cause and condition of everything in the world, and you wonder whether certification of Bodhi might arise from mixing and uniting. The Buddha said that now I will ask you a question based on the objects that you can see, the objects that's right before you.
So
let me ask you a question first. All the objects that you can see right now, they're right in front of you. From this angle, I shall ask you a question. You now hold that false thoughts mix and unite with the cause and conditions of everything in the world. Because all the worldly beings think that through the mixing of delusion and causes and conditions, everything is out of causes and conditions. So all the seeing, feeling, and the hearing, and all of those, as well as the mountains and rivers, all of those sceneries, all of those that can be perceived, according to the mundane beings, they feel that they are the production of causes and conditions. Without causes and conditions, it cannot be produced. In this way, Ananda, you also have some confusion. Your confusion is that the enlightenment, the attainment of Bodhi and mixing and uniting, what's the causes of that? What's the connection with that? Accordingly, right now, does the wonderful pure seeing essence mix with light? Does it mix with darkness? Does it mix with emptiness? Or does it mix with solid objects? So the Buddha said that, let me analyze it for you. Let me help you out. What is the analysis then? So right now, your pure essence of seeing, which is the luminous awareness, this kind of seeing nature, and the Bodhi mind, are they a production of uniting and mixing? Are they a product of, or the mixture of being mixed and united with light, with darkness, or with emptiness, or with object? Many people probably think that, oh, this kind of mind that I already know is because it is a production of certain causes and conditions. It is because of the causes and condition of the pointing out instruction I received from my guru, or from the causes and conditions of my own visualization, or from the causes and condition of my own practice. There must be some kind of causes and condition which then produce this awareness. The Buddha over here talks about what is it that your true nature has been mixed with to give the production to Bodhi. When we study Surangama Sutra, in fact, it is from the angle of emptiness. It is to use analysis and reasons to eradicate your view of holding something as solid. According to the fundamental wisdom of Madhyamika, it says that if one were to make analysis with reasons, then you would be able to see that even the Buddha, even the characteristics of the Buddha, anything in front of emptiness, it cannot be existent, even just as small as a speck of dust. In Surangama Sutra, the teaching is that through all kinds of analysis, all kinds of examples, then we will be able to see that the seeing nature itself, the nature of it is not existent. So as a Buddhist, we have to come to the conclusion and understanding and realization of it. Otherwise, it would be something that is indigestible in our stomach, which caused this hidden pain within us at all times. Because in our mind, there's something that is existent, and it will later become a spiritual cancer, which would become so solid and one would become so stubborn, and that would lead to lots of obstacles. Therefore, over here, why we talked about Ananda's questions are so timely, because those are the questions that we would encounter and we would have during our practices. Without guidance from a teacher, if we were just to read it ourselves, if we don't have this kind of practice and insights, then we probably won't understand the profundity of this teaching. The Buddha then continued to say that if it mixes with light, look further at the light. What place there is the light before you is combined with the seeing? So the four aspects, the light, darkness, the emptiness, and the solidity, they are simply the representations. And those four representations could represent all aspects of objects. The Buddha over here said that, well, if you're saying that it should be mixed, then you have to mix with the four types or four characteristics of the solid objects. If it mixes with light, look further at the light. What place there is in the light before you is combined with the seeing. If you can distinguish the characteristic of seeing, what does it look like in the combination? If Ananda says that the seeing is a combination of mixing and uniting, then throughout this process there must be uniting and mixing. Then let's look at mixing and seeing and uniting. If light mixes, if it is light that it mixes with, then you need to observe it further. Your seeing nature and light, where does it mix? It could be mixing with light, it could be mixing with darkness, it could be mixing with emptiness and object. This light could be anything, could be a cell phone, could be a computer, could be a Buddha statue. The light doesn't necessarily mean one thing. It is not one thing. Therefore, when your seeing nature mixes with light, at which place does your seeing nature mix with light? Because the light is the object, and the seeing nature is the subject. So where does the subject and object start to mix? Where does it meet? Where does it gather? Where does it abide? In this way, if you would be able to point out to the characteristic of seeing and the characteristic of light, then you should definitely be able to point out the characteristic of the combination as well. The object of seeing, which is the combination, it should definitely be easy to be pointed out, isn't it? So first of all, you need to point out the characteristic of seeing, that is the subject, and then you should be able to point out the object of seeing, which is the light, and then the object of seeing, that is a combination of seeing nature and the light. That would be very difficult. If it is not the seeing, how can you see the light? If you cannot see the seeing, then how can you see the light?
若即见者，如果没有见到，就是你说是见的话呢
If
云
it
和
is the
见见
seeing,
那
if you
自己
can't see the
见自己
seeing,
是吧？就是如果没有这个
how can the
跟受
seeing
到外
see
面的命
itself?
见到的话呢，那你自己性见到自己的性，就是那
If
这个
you
也不
don't
算
see
见了
the
那
external
这个呢就是不叫
light,
这个跟
then
名
your
合
seeing
合
is
就是跟
simply
自己跟自己见的话
seeing
呢那自
itself.
己跟
That
自己
is
怎么
not
合合呢？
seeing,
就是没办法，
because
就是
one
云和见
cannot
见。
mix with oneself.
这是一种
Therefore,
这
it
个
says,
观
how
点
can the
下面
seeing
的
see
话呢，就
itself?
是
That's
必
one
见
way
圆
of
满
making
的贺
observation.
处和明。
The next one says
如果
that
这个
it
对
is
方说呢，就
certain
是
that the
他
seeing
的那
is
个见呢，
complete.
就是已经
What
圆满
room
了。
will
圆
there
满
be
是也
for
就是里
it
面说
to
是
be
诸变，
mixed
就是
with
他的那
light?
个我的，比如说我的
In
见
the
性的话呢，它诸变于所有的这个法
commentary,
的
it
话呢
says that
那
if the
何
seeing
处
nature
和
is all
明，那就
pervasive,
是你的这个见就
then
是已
where
经圆满诸
could
变这一
this
切的话
seeing
呢，
be
在
mixed
什么
with
地
the
方呢？
light?
就是跟这个名这个合合的。就是因为诸变的话呢，那这个
Because
分
if
不
you were
清
to
楚
say
就是
that
到底
they're
是
all
在你
pervasive,
刚才说是不是跟命合合嘛？命合合的话呢，
and then you
见
said
已经
the
诸变一
seeing
切的
nature
话
has
呢，
to
就
be
是
mixed
那
with
怎
the
么合合
light.
呢？就是这个概念也是说不出来。
Since the seeing
如
nature
果
is
圆
all
满就是
pervasive,
不合见合，
then
如果你反过来
where
说是
could
这个
seeing
不是这
nature
个
be
见
mixed
就是
with
诸变
the
一切
light
的，
then?
而是这个外面的这个命呢，就是外面的这个命呢，就是已经诸变一切，
If the
圆满
light
一
is
切的话呢
complete,
那不合见合，
it
那
cannot
实
unite
际
and
上的
mix
话
with
呢，
the
就是它
seeing.
根
So
本
on the
呢就
other
没有
hand,
这个
if
和
the
那个
light
见呢，就
is
是合
all
合过，就是
pervasive,
因为它命
then
也许
it
能
cannot
诸变一
unite
切
and
的，
mix
但是
with the seeing.
实际
There's
上
no
呢，
room
就是
for
它
it.
没有这个跟见就是见面过，就是没有跟见面，就是这是命就是诸变一切一样的。见必异名，杂则
If
是
seeing is
必
different
性命
from
名
light, they both, the nature
那
and
如果
the
说是
light
你那个
lose their
见和
identity
命呢，就
when
是
they
见和命
combine.
的话，那就是它
If you were
是
to say
这
that
个对镜的
seeing
命
is
呢，就是
different
是另外
from
一个
light,
本体。
then
然后
both
有
the
镜的
nature
见
and
的
the
话
light lose
也
their
是另外一
identity
个
when they
本体的
combine.
话呢，那
Then
就
you're
这个
simply
杂
saying
就
that
是
the
就是那
seeing
么
and
这
the
两个
light,
就是
they're
杂
of
在一起
one
的话呢，就是实
identity,
际
they're
上
of
是
one
失
nature.
去了这
At
个
the same time, the
见性
object
和
that
失
is
去了
light
这
has
个
another
外面的这种命
identity,
的
has
这个名字
another
啊。就
nature,
如果
and
是
the
你
seeing
说是这个
nature,
见
which
和
is
这
the
个
subject,
命呢，就是两
has
个都
a
是
different
不同的。
has a
如果
different
这个的
nature.
话呢，就是那如
And
果它们两
adding
个
these
杂聚
two
在一起的
together,
话呢，
it is
你不能说是命和
losing
合
the
的，因为
nature
各
of
自都
seeing.
本体都是
It is
分开的。
losing the
就是你这
name
个一个
of
老虎和这个一个牦
light.
牛呢，就是
If you
放
were
在
to
一起
say
的话
that
呢，
the
你不能
light,
说
the
是这个
seeing
互
and
相
light,
已经
they
这个
are
见
of
性
different
一样的合
identity,
合，不能这么
then
说。就是
when you mix
有
these
真
two
正的
together,
本体的
it
两
is
个这
not
个
really
它的性呢也是一个
light.
本体
It is
命
not
呢
really
命呢
a
就是也是一个
mixture
本体。
of
那这样的话呢，失
light,
去了这个
because you're
见性
simply
呢，就是命
splitting
和
the
合的
two
这样的这个说
identities.
法
You
呢，
can't
就是
really
也没有。
put a tiger
如
and a
果
yak
你说
together
是
and say
还要
that
这个
the
命
seeing
和这
and
个性呢，
the
就是
light
又炸
has
在一起。刚
united.
才这个是反过来。
Since
那
the
这样的话
combination
呢，就
results in
失
the
去
loss
了这
of
个
the light
命
and
的这个
nature,
本
which
性
is
和还见
same
的本性，
logic,
这两
except
个
the
是
terms
稍微
are
就是反过来而已。
the
就是实际
substitute
上是
terms
没
are
有什么
different.
差别，就是逻辑是一样的。那这样一来的话呢，
It
就
is
是和明
meaningless
对
to
比。
say
你说是
it
跟这
mixes
个
with
见
light.
性呢，就是跟明就是
So in
合
this
在一
way,
起
you
的这种
you
说法
can't
呢，
say
实
that
际上是
light
不
can
符合道理。
light
那么同样
mixes
的道
with
理，
the
就是
nature.
暗与痛啊，还有助群塞的话呢，
The
也
same
是通过这
principle
种方
applies
式来
to
观
its
察的
mixing
话
with
呢，实
darkness,
际上
with
是见性呢，
emptiness,
就是
or
也
with
并
solid
不是跟
objects.
其他的这个四个对
So over
镜
here, it
合
shows
法
that
产生的。
the seeing nature does not
这样的
mix with the other 4 types of objects. Let's stop here today.